mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
Hey, folks. So, more than 20 years ago, I was still adrift as a young adult cancer survivor. I hadn't found a community yet. This was pre-Livestrong, maybe late 90s. And I somehow stumbled upon a nonprofit called the Wellness Community, which was founded in 1981 or so by Dr. Harold Benjamin. At the same time, there was a Gilda's Club organization that started. You know, maybe I wasn't ready for it yet, but I met the people there, and they kind of took me in, and they helped me understand what was going on and how to find myself. And I was still dealing with all these crazy side effects, super lonely, and it made such a difference in my life. They rebranded to Crossroads4Hope in the early 2000s, and they do incredible work in the community and now with the internet, a whole bunch of stuff around the world. I had the chance to meet the new leadership recently, and I got to go back to the house that I was in the late 90s. There's a physical house in New Jersey, and they host events, and I just remember being there and meeting people and getting told it's going to be okay. And my God, full circle. So joining me on the show today is Amy Sutton, who's the executive director of Crossroads4Hope. I'm going to be keynoting their conference in March of 2025. If you're hearing this, you can always go to matthewzachary.com/C4H. But you're going to hear more from Amy. And my God, you're going to love the show. And here we go. Amy Sutton, welcome to Out of Patience.
Matt Zachary, good to be here.
I'm physically seeing you in person.
I know.
It's very nice.
Real life. It's great.
I think we've only done one Zoom, but I did meet you in person already.
You did meet me in person.
So it's twice the price. Best friend.
I like this better.
Yeah. I mean, remember in person?
I do.
Well, we're 80s kids, so like we remember in person.
Everything was in person.
Everything. I was just doing another show recently about loneliness and society and how it's worsened because of social media. And hopefully, maybe, do you think we'll ever make a rebound of this return to like, we went too far and the rubber band stretched a little too far?
We'll go retro.
We're going to go retro.
I'm promoting it.
Are you a fan of banning cell phones in schools?
Yes.
Good.
I don't know that people like that, but I think it's good for the kids.
I think the terrified helicopter parents could never possibly endure, God forbid, something bad happens.
I know. But, you know, we talk about this all the time. When we grew up, I grew up, I don't know about you, but when I grew up.
I did grow up.
No, but like, I don't know what decade you grew up in.
Late 70s, 80s.
Yeah, okay. I was a little earlier than that.
That's fine.
But we were sent out to play.
Oh, yeah.
And come back when the lights on the street come on. Don't be late. And we spent all day figuring out how to survive on the streets of a suburban community.
Yep. E.T. was nonfiction.
Yeah. That's fun.
So I tend to do the right amount of stalking and spelunking on people's backstories. And I had to bring up, this is such a Gen X thing too.
Okay.
I need to know how you got to work at Rand McNally.
Oh my gosh. So it was my first job out of school. I had gone to Rutgers for labor studies, but I always leaned towards management because I thought I could do the most good for people there. And job opened up and I took it.
For those born after 9/11, Rand McNally made maps.
They did.
Atlases and
By hand.
road maps and the big fold-outs.
Yeah.
Like AAA maps with here's how you traverse America without GPS.
That's right. And you know what? We're going to be looking for those maps when the big whatever happens in this world.
When the EMP pulse destroys everything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Where's that map I had?
Yeah, we're going to bring back crank windows and stick shift as well.
I know. You won't have any technology. What will we do? I'm not even sure I could read a map today.
I know, right? We're so used to it.
Oh, yeah. No. I mean, the technology has taken over our brains.
Well, when the EMP goes off, we're going to go back to our Pontiac GTOs and our Chevelles and our Gremlins who didn't need electricity to work.
Think about how smart we're going to be to other people.
I know, right?
We'll have all this knowledge of how to live in the world without technology.
No one is going to steal my Gremlin.
Oh, God. Or your Pinto.
Exactly.
Nobody would want to steal the
No,
Pinto.
but it's like theft deterrent to use stick shift these days.
Oh, yeah. That was the first thing I drove was a stick shift.
Yeah, me too.
Can you imagine?
Did you almost kill your parents like I did?
No, I took to it like water. I loved it. Loved it.
I'm just impressed they took the risk.
Yeah, they don't really have a choice.
Well, I mean, did you burn with a clutch like I did too?
No.
All right, you one-up me.
Yeah. Well, there's a story I'll tell you afterwards. I can't say this on the air, but it's a story.
Wait, the names of the innocent are always protected here.
It was about me.
Okay, great.
We won't say it on the air,
Right,
but
so it's
after this we'll talk.
It's an epilogue.
Yes.
That'll remain, our secrets will die with us.
Exactly.
Okay. We're going to talk a lot about a bunch of stuff, but I think it's important for the listeners to know that the organization you work for is part of my throwback to the earliest of my diagnosis days. And it's also something that isn't spoken about a lot, which is history.
Yeah.
Just general history, but the history of advocacy in America with cancer started so many years ago.
Yeah.
And we look at what's going on today and what the organizations are, and some of them are there. And it's difficult to run a charity these days, which is we'll have a founder therapy or a nonprofit executive director therapy session here. But Crossroads4Hope used to be called the Wellness Community. And it was started in the 80s?
2001.
That was 01?
That's when we started.
Right, but when was it originally?
So Dr. Harold Benjamin started it in the early 80s.
Right, so there was an incredible legacy of what did it even mean to have cancer support when everyone just kind of died, right? What did that mean? There was no internet, there was no AOL floppy disks, there was not even CompuServe or Atari, right? We're in such an incredible progressive state compared to this. But my point here for everyone is that I found that wellness community in the late 90s. And I had no idea you could even have guidance or coaching, or this was before young adult cancer. It's like, I just met people. Shout out to Eunice Jedlockie, who we love forever, who just embraced me.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like, you'll be fine. Here's a cookie. It was like, this is what it means to figure yourself out.
Yeah. They took Benjamin's model and married it with their passion and vision to make sure that nobody faced cancer alone. Our organization was started by 4 women in the community, including Eunice. They just understood through their personal and professional connection to cancer that people need support so that they can lift their voices and their actions up in the face of a life-threatening cancer diagnosis. And there's a range of services that are needed to do that. I think what's happened, though, when you look at where we came from, is oftentimes the models did not evolve for the times that we're living in. So the challenges that patients face today are the same and often different than they had in the late 70s, early 80s. The complexity of cancer care, the cost, the fragmentation in healthcare, the need to have information so you can make choices about your healthcare and with a language you don't even understand.
Well, yeah, this also goes back to, I think the National Coalition for Cancer Survivorship was founded in 86, but survivorship didn't become a thing until 98. And that kind of didn't need to justify the need for organizations like these, but it certainly validated that they should exist in the first place.
Absolutely. And, we're seeing more and more data come out around people being diagnosed more frequently under the age of 50. So you start to think about the challenges that younger people face, young adults face when facing cancer. It used to be a disease of age. The older you are, the more likely you were to have cancer. And generally that's the case. But we're seeing younger and younger people. And they have hugely complex lives. And they have a future that they want to live out. And everything stops once you hear that you have cancer. So I think that's why people having a place like Crossroads4Hope, network of cancer support to turn to, you'll find support, information, resources, professionals who can walk that journey with people to whatever end that is for how long your journey is. And I think for families as well, oftentimes caregivers and family members are not part of the discussion, and they need to be.
I remember So the young adult cancer story began when someone decided to just put those words in that order. There was
Brilliant.
no young adult cancer. There was no adolescent. There was no the AYA acronym had to be invented to begin with. And I remember how much we struggled at Stupid Cancer with our cohort groups to have to somehow substantiate why we mattered as an age group. And it came down to something as simple as, we're not better or worse than kids and, Medicare patients, but we're different, and here's why. And it's less about the biology up front. It's more about that you're supposed to be taking 10 steps forward every day, making stupid mistakes and jumping off roofs and doing all the stuff. The invincibility should just be there, not the mortality. And then eventually they got it. But it was all navigation and lifestyle. And the biology is going to be the biology. But we're talking about, today's everything's mental health, which is its own circus tent umbrella. But survivorship was basically, how do you go through this with as much sanctity and agency and sanity as possible?
And with fear of recurrence and worry that comes with that. And what does that look like when you're thinking about a relationship or a career or starting a family, and that's in the back of your mind? Or the real complications that come with treating cancer at those ages. But I think from my perspective, the profession that's missing the most in healthcare that deals with this issue, who you are as a person in the context of your life, your family, and your community, is social work. And, that is the principal discipline at our organization leading our program team, because it's the disease and treatment is very important. The decisions you make, the treatment plan that you have in place is important. But it's also important to understand how that's happening in the context of your life. And the healthcare system's not built for that today.
Well, we can go into a whole other show about profit over purpose, and that's just the system we're living in now. And there's no money in helping you mentally. There's only money in helping you curatively or prescription-based or throwing medicine at you every single day. It's regrettable that the nonprofits have to even exist in the first place to solve the gap in this. But I read that you were at a nonprofit before Crossroads. I mean, you've been at Crossroads 12 years. Congratulations on
Thank you.
Over a decade of service. That's pretty long these days to sustain. I give you all the empathy and sympathy I can.
Thank you.
But you were at the Red Cross.
Yeah.
I want to hear about that because it's not apples to apples going from that to that. Everyone knows the Red Cross, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So big brand.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of expectation. And it was an organization that was also challenged by being around a long time. How do you innovate for the times that you're living in? And I think there was a lot of challenges there and opportunities. The way I approached it at the local level was it was about mobilizing people. And I would argue that's what we're doing in cancer too. Mobilizing and activating people to participate in their community. In Red Cross, it was for disaster preparedness and response. In cancer, it's making sure that people know what to do when they learn that somebody they know or love has cancer. And if it's you, how do you access resources and advocate for yourself? And how do you create that support system? And so there's a lot of commonalities. And if I go back one nonprofit further.
Yeah.
So I came out of industry, worked in human resources, and started in hospice care. Had the opportunity to see how social workers and nurses work side by side to manage end-of-life care, because it's not just the physical, it's all the practical issues, the spiritual, the psychosocial issues. So marrying those two professions together was so important. At Red Cross, it was the same thing. When your house burns down and you're in your nightgown sitting by the curb, you need to make sure there's health and mental health professionals helping you take the next step. In cancer, that's what Crossroads4Hope is. You're in a crisis, and social workers are there, our child life specialists are there to help you figure out how to take that next step so that you can start moving forward.
In terms of this is your life interrupted, and a practical issue is getting back to school, not being fired from your job, managing your children, still paying your bills, dealing with these are practical challenges that you have without being sick.
That's right.
And let alone being amplified and turned upside down, Stranger Things style, by getting a diagnosis. But I think it struck society oddly because Livestrong really did change almost like the culture a little bit to realize this is a quality of life issue as much as it is a medical issue.
I would argue it's all that. Because without quality of life, life loses meaning. And without hope, people find it hard to move forward. And so, when we only focus on disease as if that's the only issue, not how that impacts the person and their loved ones, right? The whole family has changed. And I think it's just such a mess. And what's so frustrating is this issue has been on the table since 1948. 1948, way before I was born. People understood that you are more than your disease, right? And that health requires you to deal with all of that. And we continue to build systems that only take care of one aspect of that, and it's your treatment. And we talk to a lot of people who finish their treatment and are kicked out of the system.
Yeah, walk it off. You're done.
You're done. We'll see you in 6 months. How do I move forward with this experience that I've just had? The fear that I still have, or even the physical ailments that I have.
Right. Side effects.
Absolutely.
The gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, on that note, let's take a quick break.
Yeah.
And we'll be right back with Amy Sutton. You said something before that I want to focus on, which is local. There's something to be said about being a local organization. And with the internet, you're kind of forced to be a global organization. You can't control who finds you and who engages with you. But with the Red Cross, you said that was local. Did that transfer over to C4H when you took over?
Yeah. So, yes. It's so interesting because myself and there's others in my organization who worked for big national charities. And the thing that people forget is life happens in community. There's no national thing that's happening. Your day-to-day, your home, your work, your friends, your family live in community. And depending upon what kind of community you live in, you may have access to resources and support or not. So you can't... You have to take care of both. And I think what's happened is large organizations start to scale and they pull up the ladder behind them and start pulling out local resources because it's hard to sustain that because there's usually, offices and buildings and people. But we have envisioned a different model. So we're using public health and we're piloting this in New Jersey. Boots on the ground, people with the skills that know how to do outreach, to build relationships and partnerships where we can engage the community, especially low-income and marginalized communities, to transfer knowledge, information, resources, and train people, our health champions, to know what to do when somebody they know has cancer. And that relationship doesn't end when we move on to the next community. We're building it. The model that we're putting in place can be replicated across every single state. I don't need to have an office.
Remember offices? I remember offices.
Do you remember offices? We don't need an office. There's plenty of resources in the community. And our partners become the point of entry. So we're not interested in building these towers to our model or our organization. We're about the work. And the work happens through people and relationships.
So I tend to look... So I come from consumer marketing. That was like where I wound up landing after I got sick and I couldn't be a pianist anymore. And in retail, we talk about impression, conversion, and retention. What's the intervention to make sure someone knows to buy something they didn't know they needed with money they don't have? That's basically DTC. But with cancer, it's a store you don't want to shop, and I've been on the record saying this for a million years. What is the intervention? It's kind of like a softball question. Where's the intervention? Who steps in when to say you need to know all the stuff that you had no idea that you should have researched when you went to Cancer University?
Yeah. It's interesting. It's different for each person, right? It's so personal because in the beginning, when you're first diagnosed, it's overwhelming. People can't even take in information. And that's why my analogy to what we're doing is when you think about CPR. The reason we train so many people in CPR is because we don't know where and when someone's going to have a heart attack. We just don't know when those skills are going to be needed. So you have to have enough people in the community who know what to do to respond effectively. I would argue that's the same with cancer, especially in communities where there's a lack of resources. So you really have to scale up the number of people you're training or activating so that there's enough people around who can step in, because it's so unique to each person. There's some people who never can take it in. And there's no judgment. It's just when they're ready, it has to come from somebody that they trust. That is a neighbor, a friend, a colleague, a family member. Those are the people we need to have empowered and activated and ready to go in case somebody they know has cancer.
Well, the when you're ready speaks to me a lot. At Stupid Cancer, we had lots of folks who did find out about us, and they just kind of said, it's nice to know you're there, but I'm not ready for this yet. So what's worse, like knowing it's there and don't need it, or never finding out that it's there, right? Clearly the second one.
Absolutely.
So do you work primarily, or help me unpack how you do the trainings? It's typically you find that people who are there, who already got through it or are dealing with it, and they're the masters. They know as much as you might need to know. Is that where you start?
Yeah. It is amazing when you start to talk to people, how many people want to do something. And I'll give you individual examples and I'll give you organizational. So we have people who have come through our organization who are at a point in their life where they want to give back. They want to do something meaningful. And they often don't know other than to share their own personal experience, which is helpful. But what are the tangible things that somebody can do? And so they're coming to us and they're saying, we want to do this training. But we're also running across organizations. Like we trained one of the consulates because they're fielding questions every day about cancer from people. And none of their professional staff know what to do. From my vantage point in the cancer space, we're working far too downstream. We have to be further upstream where people live and with the organizations that they're accessing resources in, because those are the people that have the best shot of connecting people to resources. They're already working with people on immigration or other issues. And so people are coming to us in different ways. But it all comes from the point at which they want to help. People don't know what to do. And oftentimes I'll talk to people and they feel so frustrated because they don't know how to help somebody they love. So that's how we're reaching out to people. And our public health team are the ones that are helping us navigate this in very targeted communities. So if anybody's listening on this call today, they can call us and sign up. There are open classes, but we're just now getting to scale this work.
It meant a lot to me personally and professionally. You brought up caregiving because, for X amount of years, it was like this cast aside. Oh, by the way, you're here too. And, Stupid Cancer was important to make sure that the sort of the boomer parents of the Gen Xers that were our community had a say. And my dad stepped up. My dad was 47 when I was 21. Your son's given 6 months to live. How do you manage that? And my God, what he had to do to get the family through those couple of years with catastrophe policies and insurance and driving me every day to Sloan Kettering. And he really took the reins on helping to give a voice to, was relatively boomers in their 40s and 50s at the time to do that. But it was the first ever AYA caregiver sort of national voice. But when do you think caregiving was realized in terms of maybe something more naturally understood? Or has it even been to that point yet?
I have to tell you, I don't think we're there yet. I really feel like it's still oftentimes an afterthought. Because think about it, in the healthcare system, they're not the ones being treated, so there's no billing or resources being allocated. And yet what we know very clearly from the data, caregivers have a direct impact on a patient's quality of life, access to care. You can go down the list of issues. And Very few, if any, organizations have robust programs that bring in the caregiver as part of their focus. And so I don't think we're there yet.
Well, again, we were just saying, speaking of sirens, you're an EMT.
Yeah.
And I thank you for that.
Yeah.
One of my best friends from like grade school was an EMT, and he used to tell, he was in Manhattan. So he's like, there's nothing like doing 80 on Fifth Avenue. I was like, okay, tell me, you have one of those stories?
No. Well, I was trained. I actually didn't work professionally as an EMT. I did it as part of my emergency management background. But during the training, we had to be in the squads. And it's nerve-wracking going through lights. It's very scary. So, you think how many accidents happen because a squad goes through the light and a car T-bones the squad. That happens a lot. So men and women are taking their lives into their own hands to help others. And I don't think the public always thinks about that. Oftentimes they're doing it as volunteers. So thank you for acknowledging it.
Yeah, it's a big deal. I mean, I every time that there's someone from the military, I mean, you're volunteering.
That's right.
It's incredible.
Yeah, for your community.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we were talking about community earlier. With all technology out there, everybody's connected and they're forgetting about what's happening in their neighborhood, on their blocks. That's where we need to be investing in people's communities.
So how do the local cancer centers play a role in community organizations like yours?
Yeah. It's changed over time. And I think that oftentimes their resources are stretched very thin now. So there's less and less, I think, collaboration. It looks different. And as these healthcare institutions get bigger, as they consolidate, they're not local anymore.
That's right. They're getting Pac-Man'd up.
They are. So, I think that they have tentacles into the community, but partnerships look different for sure.
Do you remember in the 90s, you weren't in the cancer world back then, but back in the 90s and even the early 2000s, every one of these cancer centers had a library, an actual library, like not a Dewey Decimal Library.
That's right.
Look it up, kids, Dewey Decimal System.
There'll be a test at the end of this.
Essay test, an oral written essay test. And anyone that went in there was instantly made aware of resources that were just pieces of paper sitting there. And that's all gone now. And that was like navigation. That was print, kill trees, navigation.
Yeah.
And that isn't there today. So is there any responsibility or accountability on the part of the center to serve as sort of like a wayfaring, divining rod? Here are all the things you should know resource-wise outside the clinic.
Yeah. I think that a lot has changed in healthcare, especially after the pandemic. And I think they're honing their focus in on treatment. And some of them still have libraries. I've seen them walking through the cancer centers.
Wow.
Are they used? I'm not sure. But this idea of navigation is really the issue. And I would argue that navigation alone is not enough. If you are worried, afraid, distressed, it's impossible to take in information and resources. So you have to have support to give people the space to be able to take in information and resources. And a lot of times the centers do not have the psychosocial support resources. It's all tactical. Maybe we'll do navigation, maybe there's a library or whatever, but they're disparate activities. And we have to start with the person. Where are they in their thinking about this and in their needs? And how do we start to tackle those issues in their priority order? Because you know what? Sometimes it's, I don't have childcare. I can't get to care if I don't have childcare, or I'm worried about my job. Oftentimes what we hear has nothing to do with the cancer. We have to get through all of these other issues before we're really tackling the impact of that disease on somebody's life.
So talk me through the process. Someone discovers your organization, and I still say maybe they happen to find it, which shouldn't be the case. Should be told about it. What does that look like for you organizationally?
Well, surprisingly, they could call and actually talk to somebody without having an appointment.
How novel.
There's a live person. Yeah, so our team is accessible to talk with people. They might set up a follow-up call, but, it starts with you. where are you at, what's happening, and understanding of what they've been diagnosed with or their loved one, and really getting a sense for who they are and what do they understand about their diagnosis or their loved one's diagnosis. And then there's a process of understanding what their needs are and what the hierarchy of those needs are. So we end up giving people the opportunity to enroll in our My Go-To Support program, which is a direct-to-mobile digital program. People can access support 24/7 on their mobile device without having to download an app. But in that program, we're asking people each week, how are you doing? And depending upon how you tell us you're doing, there's additional questions that help us understand what your most pressing need is in that week. And that goes to our social work team, and we can follow up with you to help you get through that issue so that doesn't become a barrier to your care or your life. And that, to me, is an example of bringing psychosocial support into the 21st century.
It's also important for me to note to the listeners that there is a physical house.
Yeah, there is.
Remember those? Right?
Yeah.
That you could go to, and you host events there.
We do.
And you welcome people there. And it's old school enough to really matter in a very unique way these days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, it's interesting. It was designed to feel like you were going to a friend's house. And because what we know is that patients and families spend so much time in a clinical environment that feels very impersonal. And we didn't want that. So, people will tell me that the minute they step onto our property, they feel at peace.
And I echo that because I've been there.
Mm-hmm.
I totally echo that.
It really is a safe space. And so that energy permeates the whole property. But we carry that with us no matter who we're talking to. I mean, we're supporting people in California and Texas, and we've got people calling in from Canada for resources. And I think because of the way the social workers are trained, that feeling of safe, this feeling of personal, that you are the focus, you matter, and the people in your life matter. And we're here to help you because your needs can change over time. They're not static.
No.
So it's interesting. We will start working with people from the point at which they're worried about a cancer diagnosis. We call that previvors, due to job or genetics, through diagnosis, treatment, into survivorship, and for family members and caregivers through that whole journey and into bereavement if needed. But we don't go away. And we are a hub for people. So you can come to us. Our team can connect you to additional resources in your local community, but we're always there. We don't go away. And then there's other resources and programs you can access when you're ready.
That's amazing. All right, let's wrap the show with the reason that, we've known each other. We're besties, but I am the proud keynote of your 2025 Professional Development Conference in exotic New Brunswick, New Jersey on March 21st. By the way, if you're hearing this show after the event, I'm sure it's archived and you can get information from it. You can always hit up Crossroads4Hope.org to get, again, if you're hearing this after the conference, but if you're hearing this before the conference, please register for the conference. Give us a quick download on what to expect.
Yeah. So this program is our way of transferring knowledge to professionals and really helping them to understand the experience of young adults who are facing cancer. So there's different tracks that people could go through, but it's really a way for us to help inform and activate professionals so they're better equipped to support the needs of these individuals.
So I'm just going to read off here a couple of topics from the sessions. Navigating transitions in care for AYA patients, from Googling to healing, technology's role in cancer care for the digital generation. Oh my God, Dr. Google. HPV vaccines in cancer prevention. My children are 14. They're going to get Gardasil next spring. Healthcare professionals' guide to speaking to families about HPV. Supporting siblings. There we go. The siblings and peers. I had friends that abandoned me, right? So how would I have talked to them? This was the 90s. You were magnetic and radioactive. We have here the disclosure dilemma, considerations for sharing a diagnosis with youth. We talked about your digital footprint affecting your HR job applications back in the 2000s, and empowering young caregivers. There you go, the caregivers. balancing challenges and changes while embracing resilience. This speaks to me, obviously, as the sort of the godfather of AYA. It's so important that this narrative is still continuing.
Yeah, we're excited to have you join us.
Yeah. So again, I made a custom website for this. I think you could MatthewZachary.com/C4H. Easier because I keep saying crosswords as Crossroads. MatthewZachary.com/C4H. You can register at any given time. Again, March 21st, plenty of time to get your ass in gear and be there. I will be there, obviously, as the keynote. I'm just so happy to be a part of your community, and kind of, it's such a full circle for me 20 plus years later.
Yeah, we're so excited to have you. And it is a full circle moment. So the fact that you're at this point in your life, in your career, and you're going to give back by helping others to know what they can do to help these young individuals.
Amy Sutton is the CEO of Crossroads. Said it right. Crossroads4Hope. I'm so grateful to have you on the show. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
Out of Patience with Matthew Zachary is a production of Matthew Zachary Worldwide. The executive producer is Matthew Zachary. It is mixed and edited by Kyle Moore. If you like the show, ratings and reviews are always welcome wherever you get your podcasts. If you have guest suggestions or would like to learn more about sponsorship opportunities, email podcast@MatthewZachary.com. For more information about Matthew Zachary and Matthew Zachary Worldwide, visit MatthewZachary.com.